Ex-racist people of Reddit, what changed your views?
As a lurker, this is a thread I can contribute to. From birth I was raised to be racist in a racist household, VA. I was ignorant. I used the N-word, anti-Semitic, homophobic, racist language every day. My immediate family and extended family all share the same ignorance. At family gatherings, if one of my older cousins let slip they were dating someone new, the first question would be, is S/E white? Followed by laughter, but the question was serious. Then I started middle school. 6th grade. On the first day of class I set down my backpack against the classroom wall, like every other student, while we found our desks and had a small meet and greet with new classmates. I made sure to only speak to the kids, white, whom I knew from elementary school. Our teacher told us to take our seats. I'm 42 years old and I remember this like it was yesterday. I picked up my backpack, found my desk. Before I could open my bag, the girl behind me told me she liked my earrings. Her mom wouldn't let her get her ears pierced until high school. Then I heard another voice from further behind me say, "Miss K, this isn't my backpack." The backpack sitting on this girl's desk was identical to the one sitting next to my desk. We both opened our backpacks and realized we'd grabbed the wrong bag. Internally I rolled my eyes in disgust. This girl was a N. But I was taught to never let it show. So we met each other to quickly exchange. Her smile was beautiful. She wore glasses the same shape as mine. She wore her hair in a ponytail, just like mine. In our back-to-school shopping we picked the exact same backpack and we picked the exact same Nikes, pink/white. Her name was Jacinda. I found myself genuinely smiling back to her, and giggling like young girls do. That day she asked to sit together during lunch, and we sat beside each other for lunch every single day of middle school. She was my very first best friend. Jacinda taught me about her Sunday school classes. My family never attended church. We talked about everything important in the life of middle school girls. She wasn't allowed to attend my birthday parties, and I wasn't allowed to go to hers, but we always celebrated together at school. I loved her so much. When it was time to go to high school I continued in public school and her parents chose to homeschool her. I thought homeschooling was the coolest idea. Jacinda is, brilliantly intelligent. God, she was going to do great things for this world. Long before the age of social media, we lost touch sadly, but I still think of her often. After meeting Jacinda I never used another racist or derogatory word. Meeting Jacinda changed my life for the better.
Not me, but my best friend's parents. They told her not to touch me because she would get my skin disease. I'm a brownie and at the time we met I was 12. They didn't want us to be friends, but I would always be kind and polite to them, full well knowing how they felt about my skin color. One year my friend, at this point best friend, was having a sleepover birthday party and her parents said I could come, but couldn't sleep over. My friend cancelled her party and her parents must have felt like complete beep because they started to talk to me more and more after that. We have been best friends for almost 30 years now. Her parents came to my wedding. They send me a Christmas card every year, they call me and ask how I'm doing, and they invite me to their get-togethers. I'm glad they came around and I'm proud of them.
Learning about people by talking to them instead of listening to what my family had to say about them.
The army forced me to live with black people. Turns out I didn't hate anyone. I was just afraid of what I didn't understand and had some very stupid notions passed on to me from my dad and his beep friends. I will forever be grateful for the opportunity to understand a greater sample of people than my tiny hometown afforded me. Edit. Thank you all, kind strangers. Please no more awards though. If possible, please consider donating instead to an organization working to deprogram extremism and hate, like Parents for Peace or Life After Hate.
Brother was racist. We both love science fiction. One time he was talking about all the cool races in the Star Wars and Star Trek and Mass Effect universes. How creative Lucas and Roddenberry were. He talked about how great it would be to be among those races as a human and acquaint yourself with alien cultures and people and mythology. I said, you can't even mingle with the other races on your home planet. Maybe it was the weed, but what I said had some effect on him. He's very noticeably more tolerant and curious about other peoples now. I think he realized that his previous philosophies were not in line with those of the Federation. Good for him. Edit. No, I didn't realize what day it was. Nice coincidence though. May the force be with all of you.
My dad was racist. I was raised in a toxic environment and I guess some of his ideologies rubbed off on me. He was also violent when alcohol was involved, which was a lot of the time. Police would often arrest him to just get him in a cell for the night for being disorderly. On one occasion, the police turned up, One of them came into my room and sat with me as they dealt with my dad. He asked how I was, who I could talk to, etc. He was from a South Asian background. He was very kind to me and did his best in calming me down and giving me advice and dealing with this stuff. I was only about 15 at the time. As they were pulling my dad out, that same police officer was attacked by my dad after breaking free from another officer, breaking the officer's finger in the process, whilst also hurling verbal, racial abuse at him. It wasn't long after the London bombings, so you can imagine what was said. My dad was also an electrician in Russell Square at the time, close to one of the blasts. The officer didn't react, probably knowing I was watching the commotion from my room or the fact he was a decent human being. My dad was convicted of multiple offenses against a police officer as well as a hate crime. The only silver lining was as my dad was being sentenced, the prosecutor was a black man who casually read out the testimony of the arresting officer of what my dad said that night. The prosecutor could barely keep a straight face, watching my dad hold his head in shame, dressed in plastic overalls because he thought stuffing his clothes down the toilet of his jail cell and flooding the place would be funny. He got community service, probation, and was required to attend rehab. He relapsed a few years ago and can barely walk or talk because of multiple strokes from continued alcohol dependency. The people responsible for protecting me from my dad were people of color. That sure as hell changes your perspective on things even if you have the slightest ignorance towards another race. Edit. Typo TLDR. Dad was a violent racist dressed in prison overalls, sentenced by educated black guy in suit.
I didn't realize I was racist and being raised in a racist household until 4th grade. I was in a group project having to give a presentation to the class. My group was me and 2 black girls. My parents hated black women. Black people in general, but especially black women. As they both watch tennis, you can guess all the beep they said about the Williams sisters. Meanwhile, there I was standing there watching my group mates talk. They were just as good, if not better than me, at talking in the class. Or understanding the material. Or anything really. I can still see that moment where the class fades away in my mind and one of my group mates is talking to the class, where I realize a fundamental truth. My parents were wrong. It still makes me sad thinking about stuff I remember saying as a kid. Regurgitating things I heard my parents or relatives say. But in my experience, as I have gotten older, is that the #1 way to combat racism is to bring people into the same room. When people have shared experiences, that sense of otherness fades away. Of course, in 2021 and the internet bring what it is, it's really easy for people to hide in their own corners of the internet. But I'm thankful for that experience in 4th grade. I got in trouble a lot over the years for getting mad when family would throw around the N-word or lock their doors when they saw black people. But I knew I was right. And in the decades that have passed, nothing has tarnished or taken away that childhood lesson.
My dad would make disparaging remarks about black people, Mexicans, Chinese people, etc. When I was a kid, I remember repeating those same sentiments and no one ever corrected me. In 1st grade, we were all assigned pen pals from a school in another city, and mine was a black girl named Chardonnay. I thought she had a weird name and I was disappointed when I found out she wasn't white. Very soon after that, we learned some very basic info about the civil rights movement during Black History Month. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, separate water fountains, segregated schools, stuff like that. After that, I felt really bad about being racist and wanting a different pen pal, and really ashamed of my dad and grandparents for thinking that way. And I was so mad that they'd taught me to think that way. After that, I was really happy to have the opportunity to write to my pen pal and get to know her better. I'm so thankful that my school started teaching us about racism early on. It's scary to think how I could have ended up if those sentiments had gone unchecked.
Not me, but my grandpa told me that when he was young he was a bit racist, due to his a whole alcoholic dad being really racist and teaching him to treat others of different races like trash. He told me this stopped though when he was around 13 when his dad left. He realized how stupid it was to judge others based on race, and I'm glad he realized how stupid it was since he's a really sweet guy now.
My grandma grew up in Virginia in the 1900s. Being racist is just the default setting. Nana loved her family more than anything, though. So at one point in the late 1980s, she met her first not 100% white grandkid, and discovered she still loved him. She made astounding late-life progress accepting that darker skin-toned people were not only people, but family, friends and welcome in her house.
A guy I worked with said he was neo-Nazi as a teenager, and ended up in prison somehow. He hated Jews for some reason, and blacks. He was never clear on why, just that he had so much hatred in his heart, and that was his outlet. He was in prison for many years. I think he almost killed somebody by beating them up. So, many years later in prison there was a mentor-type staff there, and this one lady was so helpful to him, and she cared about him so much that it really started to get into his head the idea of being a positive person. Then, he learned that she was Jewish, and he said he couldn't believe she was so kind and caring despite the fact he was a claimed neo-Nazi. From that day he swore to be a better person. He learned his lesson. He's a pretty great guy these days, doing his family thing and making sure his son grows up with lots of love and all that he didn't have. Really remarkable, great guy.
Man, I don't even know where to start with this one. I grew up in the middle of Beep Nowhere, Mississippi, where the slave trade was referred to as the Great African Migration in our history books. Every person of color was referred to by the N-word as just the default. It wasn't until I moved the Beep out of the South that I began to comprehend what racism was. I wish I could say I had a moment of clarity that washed away all the racist Beep that I'd grown up with, but it was more like a couple decades worth of mental deprogramming I had to fight against. There was so much underlying hate of different people that warped how my view of the world was.
When I was wounded in Iraq, 2 white guys stepped over me. One literally stepped on my back, to get themselves to a safer place. A black guy picked me up like I was a child, carried me to safety, and held my hand until a medic got there.
I was a nice white racist. I think a big part of it was that I grew up in a very white town. So the only information I got about other cultures was from TV and other media. I never said a racial slur and never thought of myself as racist. I was perfectly nice to anybody I met. But I would definitely hold my purse a little closer if a black or Latino man was passing me. I believed cliches about other races. I generally thought of the POC folks I met as the exceptions to the cliches about their people. Then I started seriously dating an Asian man. I'd never dated a non-white person before. I was shocked by how frequently we had people give us double takes when holding hands in public. We were on a road trip and stopped by Walmart for some snacks. It was the first time I've really felt unsafe. People were glaring at us simply because we were a mixed-race couple. We split up in that Walmart for safety. I asked him if that's how he always felt in small towns, and he laughed and said that how he always felt in the town I had grown up in too. It was a medium-sized college town. That was my big wake-up call. I started analyzing my thinking. I started catching myself thinking in stereotypes. I started noticing I was being racist and started trying harder to be less racist. I'm not perfect. I'm still a little awkward around black people. I still catch myself thinking racist thoughts, but I think I'm better than I was a few years ago. I married the Asian boyfriend. If you marry the person who helps you be the best version of yourself.
I moved away from my one-horse hometown and got away from my extremely prejudiced family.
I don't have personal experience in this, but I wanted to bring up Daryl Davis in this thread. He is a black musician, writer that has gotten roughly 200 people to leave the KKK or other white supremacist organizations. He is worth looking into for this topic.
Left the church and my conservative family. Started examining myself closely. The really tricky thing about being a racist is that you never think you're a racist at the time. In the moment you feel like you're just quoting statistics, or calling it how it is, etc. It takes a lot of work to actually stop, look at yourself, and then dig that ugly racist worm out of your heart.
Moving out of a predominantly white neighborhood and meeting people of differences, races and backgrounds. Realizing they are just people like you trying to live their lives.
May your day be filled with joy and happiness. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more quality content every day.